My name is Charlie Vasquez. I'm a nonprofit consultant and grant writer based in New York. I'll be moderating today's interactive panel, so we're really looking forward to hearing from you. But before we do that, if you could just turn to someone, whoever's to your right, just to acknowledge whoever's there, even if they're like 10 seats over, and then turn to your left, acknowledge who's there. Maybe shake off the day, shimmy your shoulders a little bit, get your blood going. If you want to jump up and, if you want to stand up and jump, that's cool. Just to reinvigorate yourself and just to start off on a fun note. So I've already introduced myself. Today's panel is called Whistleblowers Without Borders, an interactive workshop on U.S. laws for transnational use. So we'll begin the first third of this workshop will be the panelists sort of talking about who they are and what they do as relates to this workshop. The middle act, if you will be the actual breakout groups, and I'll sort of be directing you when we get to that. And there you get a chance to kind of share your ideas and perspectives with very knowledgeable session moderators, and then the Act 3, we're all going to sort of come back and report on what we discover with you on this journey together, and how that will inform a letter to the U.S. Congress that the National Whistleblower will be delivering that could include all of your very precious input. So if you're sitting in front of if there's no colored Post-it in front of where you're sitting, you may want to come closer, because you're going to need one of those colored Post-its for the breakout sessions. But we'll work with you. So, welcome to everyone coming in. Bienvenidos, bienvenue, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, our first panelist today is Siri Nelson from the National Whistleblower Center. She's going to introduce herself, and then we're going to go down the line and get this going.
Okay, thank you so much. So. If you guys aren't really familiar with me, I'm way more outrageous than everybody else. So I'm actually going to ask you to stand up. My name is Siri Nelson. I am the Executive Director of National Whistleblower Center. If you see a green Post-it in front of you, or a pink one or an orange one, if you don't see a Post-it in front of you, you must be in a place where you can see a Post-it. Do you see a Post-it? If you're back there, do you see a Post-it? You got a Post-it? Anybody doesn't have a Post-it? Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to take your hand and grab that Post-it. Does everybody have a Post-it in their hand? I need to see. Put your Post-it up high. Who has? I see those people back there. You guys don't have Post-its. Let me see some Post-its. Let me see. I'm going to get up on this chair. If I see someone without a Post-it, I'm going to bring you one. All right, so if you have a pink Post-it, come sit in this little circle here. If you have a pink Post-it, come to the front. If you have a green Post-it, go to this side. So this is your left, my right. Green Post-its here, pink Post-its in the front. So you're green, you got to go back, a little further back. Pink in the front here, green just right behind, yep, to your left but my right. And all the oranges should be here, which is your right but my left. Orange here. You want to be orange? We got the oranges. Good job. So if you're in an orange spot, you can sit down. If you're already there, you can sit down. Good job. So can you guys come a little closer? Because you're all going to be talking together. Greens over here. Yeah, greens. You guys are making moves. Good job. Pinks. Got the pinks up here? Let me see you guys with your Post-its up again. I need to see color coding. Do I see colors? Green, pink, orange. Woo, you did it! You did it! You accomplished the first goal of this workshop, which is to divide yourselves into 3 groups. Thank you so much for your cooperation. So I am Siri Nelson. I am the Executive Director of National Whistleblower Center. We have been amplifying the voices of whistleblowers and fighting for whistleblower protection since 1988. I am so excited to be here at the International Anticorruption Conference. I am even more excited that Jake Sullivan mentioned whistleblowers several times this morning. It's incredible. So your interest just warms my heart.
Your cooperation is exciting, and we're gonna have a great conversation today with me and my colleagues. So I'm just gonna pass it to Angeles. She's gonna tell you about herself, and we're gonna get into it. But first, I want you to see this. This is a little handout. It has some information in it. You can use your phone to go to www.whistleblowers.org/IACC 2020 and see that PDF when you click on Workshop Handout. So if you're having a hard time reading that, we wanted to go paperless, and you can find it online. If you want to look for it during your breakout session, you can ask your moderator for the address again. And if you really don't know how to find it, you can ask me, okay? Thank you. Go ahead, Angeles.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm super excited. So I'm Angeles Estrada. I am Mexican, and I am the Executive Director of the Transparency and Anticorruption Initiative in the Tecnológico de Monterrey. It's a private university in Mexico. I'm also a professor of anti-corruption in government, companies, and society in the same university. I am an advisor for the International Whistleblower Center. I'm so sorry. And currently, I am member of the selection committee of the Citizens Participation Committee of Mexico's National Anti-Corruption System. Happy to be here.
Cool. And Carlos Guerrero.
Yes, thank you. How are you, everyone? I'm Carlos Guerrero, an anti-corruption specialist in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'm based in Mexico, where I lead a non-profit organization that is called Derechos, Humanos, Litigio, Estratégico, Mexicano, for short, DLM. And I'm also the head of a division at a private law firm on litigation, anti-corruption litigation. Whistleblowers Without Borders is an amazing opportunity to debate the future that whistleblowers deserve in the world. I am very honored to be in this panel sharing with Charlie, Siri, and Angeles, passionate about this topic. And during the time that we've been collaborating over the months, I have learned so much from them. So it's going to be a fun afternoon talking and debating about whistleblowers. Thank you.
Perfect. So now let's go a little deeper into the heart of the matter, into the heart of the work that you do as applies to the objective of this interactive workshop, just to sort of give the people who are present here, a little more granular detail about what each of you do, starting with Siri.
Okay.
So as I mentioned, National Whistleblower Center has been fighting for whistleblower rights and protection since 1988, which is incredible. In the past years, we've been incredibly active in the global whistleblower space. So we've worked with nonprofits around the world in order to help them understand how to protect whistleblowers in their countries, but also how to use US laws, which are highly effective, to blow the whistle about fraud in their countries without having to face retaliation and with being eligible for rewards.
Angeles.
Yeah. So with Carlos, we co-created Whistleblowing Corruption COVID and Whistleblower Corruption Vaccines. And these were technological tools designed for any person that wanted to report acts of corruption related to the detection, diagnosis, and treatment of the COVID-19 virus. This project was selected by the Paris Peace Forum 2020 as one of the 100 projects to consider in building a better world after COVID-19, and we're still there, so that's why we're not doing it. And the data we collected with this project helped us to generate real-time statistics of incidents of corruption and operational deficiencies of medical services in Mexico. But also we were aiming to help whistleblowers to file formal complaints. Unfortunately, we had just 4 of 700 cases. We just had 4 people interested in alerting authorities to carry out formal investigations. So yes, in Mexico, as well as many other countries, we have a huge problem with the rules, the procedures, the authorities in charge of protecting whistleblowers. And that's why we got in touch with the National Whistleblower Center. And from there, we have been working together regarding how can we use the advances that other countries have in the protection of whistleblowers, and of course, take advantage of those advances. Thank you.
Carlos?
Yes, thank you. Well, the organization that I work for in Mexico, the LM, is a nonprofit, as I said, that is very interested in working on whistleblowing and reporting. We started in Mexico in 2015, but soon after we expanded and worked with important organizations in the States, with organizations in Latin America and also in the Caribbean. We have a special interest, as I said, on whistleblowing. What are the challenges? What are the best practices? How the authorities are reacting to this topic? And we have divided over the years our work into three. First one, litigation. We're in Mexico specialist on litigation matters, mostly related to constitutional and human rights matters. But regarding whistleblowing, we are interested to know what are the judges, what are the judiciary and the authorities, anti-corruption agencies thinking about whistleblowing. On the second hand, we are interested also in the research, best practices, I said. What are the best practices in the world on this matter? And the third one, the implementation of reporting mechanisms. As Angeles said, we developed this digital platform called Denuncia Corrupción Coronavirus, Whistleblowing Corruption Coronavirus. We got more than 600 reports. And the interesting part of it is that mostly the 600 of them were and remained as anonymous. The whistleblowers wanted to be anonymous while they were reporting. It was a very interesting experience. But also we have represented in Mexico to whistleblowers that are suffering any kind of retaliation by the government, by authorities, but also by private companies. We have produced several papers and reports regarding the challenges of the region with regards protection of whistleblowing, reporting mechanisms in companies in the private sector, the human rights perspective that whistleblowers should have, and the legal standing of civil society organizations, human rights defenders, and activists that report corruption.
Cool.
Thank you.
So we allotted some time to speak about use of U.S. laws, how U.S. laws are applicable in overseas context. So I think we can close the setup to this with a conclusion about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we're going to talk about their laws too. Cool. You know, not just America.
Not just American laws.
Not just
These
United
are the smart
States
people.
of America. They're the rest of America. So here you have the handout. I think this is probably the easiest way to follow it. So again, www.whistleblowers.org/IACC 2022. You can go to the website, and then there's a little link that says, it's right at the top, it says workshop handout, and you can see this on your phone if you have a hard time seeing it up here, which, to be honest, I would personally have as well, but we're trying to go paperless. So in the United States, we have some really highly effective laws, and these laws are empirically supported. Researchers have found that the elements of these laws encourage more people to come forward with good information about how to stop fraud and wrongdoing around the world. So this is why we support them. Most of these include the best practices that National Whistleblower Center supports and helps educate global leaders about, and that is anti-retaliation, anonymity, and rewards. So here we have the Dodd-Frank Act, which is the law that established the Securities and Exchange Commission whistleblower program and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission whistleblower program. These programs have brought in not just millions, but billions of dollars back to the United States. They have rewarded whistleblowers over $1 billion. This year alone, the CFTC gave a whistleblower a nearly $200 million award for helping them stop financial crime that was transnational. It wasn't just in the United States. That's why these laws are so important.
They empower people from around the world, no matter where they are, to report to these two agencies, give them credible information about wrongdoing, and then the United States government takes action to stop the crimes that they reported and ultimately give these whistleblowers rewards. The False Claims Act is a law that prevents fraud against the US government. It empowers individuals to come forward with information about violations, for example, to government contracts. The US government contracts with people around the world, which means violations of those contracts can happen anywhere. Wherever the US is doing business with anyone, there's a possibility that someone is ripping the government off. And a whistleblower is best positioned to know about that fraud. They can come to the United States and file a lawsuit on behalf of the US government reporting the fraud. And if the Department of Justice decides to enforce, they can be rewarded. The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act deals with a lot of the type of misconduct we heard about earlier in the plenary, bribery, and different types of offshore activities. This can be enforced by Securities and Exchange Commission as well, but also the IRS. The IRS whistleblower program has to do with money that should have been paid in taxes by people who should be paying taxes to the United States, even though they live outside of the United States and aren't paying taxes. Whistleblowers from around the world have reported to the IRS about tax fraud, and the IRS has taken action and rewarded those whistleblowers in the millions. This has changed the global economic system. This has increased accurate reporting in banks around the world. This has impacted fraud in the Swiss banking system, making it more lucrative to report fraud than it is to commit it. This is why we love these laws. And this is why it's so important that people around the world know they can use these laws.
Thank you, Siri. Angeles.
No, I think that I'm the third one.
Third one, sorry.
Yes. Now we're going to go with international standards. International treaties have defined several practices and best practices for states that they should adopt in their countries, in their regulatory, national, or local framework. One of the concepts that it's very important to analyze is the public interest information. What is the report? What is the topic that the whistleblowers are reporting? And the public interest information, it's not only the one that defines the authorities, but it's also the public interest information, what the civil society define, the media define, the public interest define. With this regard, it's important to, of course, the protection of the personal data, and that reporting invalidates every contractual obligation or confidentiality agreement. The second one is that the whistleblowers could be not only public servants, but also could be private individuals. We should start thinking if the civil society organizations could be also and act as whistleblowers in the country. The third one, that the report should be in good faith and under or for reasonable causes. How verifiable the facts are and how original the report is. The fourth one is related to a very important topic, which is protection, and has a connection with the reparation of harm suffered by the reporters, by the alerters, by the whistleblowers, and the possibility also to apply for provisional protective measures in a reasonable time that they should be granted. Of course, the need of independent and confidential assessment. Sometimes the lawyers think that all the people, all the citizens know about laws and all know about regulation, but the fact is that they don't, so it's important for them to have assessment. Another one is the possibility for whistleblowers to appear before external agencies or stakeholders to report corruption. And this is as alternative when the national systems or when the internal mechanisms are not efficient, when they have inefficiencies, when they lack of a recourse, when a state lack of a recourse. And of course, the recognition of certain rights for whistleblowers, such as like to be heard in a court of law, to receive a final resolution, and to get the status of anonymity. The directive of the European Parliament, in my point of view, defines very interesting practices for the European Union, such as the notion of breach that also includes abusive practices that do not appear to be unlawful, in informal terms, but defeat the object of the purpose of the law. On the second hand, the third parties could also be authorized to receive reports on behalf of legal entities in the private and public sector. And one that is very important that the directive develop is the public disclosure. A person that made a public disclosure qualifies for protection when he, she, or they reported internally and externally, but no action was taken. On second hand, when there is an imminent danger to the public interest. But meanwhile this is happening, we have a situation, at least in the Latin America and Caribbean region, where half of the countries do not have protection mechanisms in their frameworks. Few of the countries have financial reward or compensation programs. Only some of the countries do not have a regulation regarding any kind of reporting for whistleblowers. In some of the countries, the public disclosure of anti-corruption make the whistleblower liable civilly and criminally. Whistleblowing is the most efficient mechanism for detecting fraud, and the states should notice it. There are many other deficiencies in the region. Right now, the whistleblowers are suffering arbitrary attacks, harassment, judicial and non-judicial, and attacks and other kinds of persecution. For example, in Mexico, in my country, has become the second most dangerous country in the world for journalists, human rights defenders, and whistleblowers. I guess there are, just like to finalize, few areas of opportunity and in this matter to call to action. First, whistleblowers are anti-corruption human rights defenders. Second, corruption is not a victimless crime or offense, so whistleblowers could be or could become victims of corruption. And third, that states should be financially liable for the omission to protect whistleblowers.
Thank you, Carlos. Angeles.
Yeah, thank you. So, economic globalization has globalized corruption, but unfortunately, it hasn't globalized the protection of whistleblowers. Currently, through different transnational corruption schemes, other crimes, such as drug trafficking and money laundering, and other crimes even more heinous, such as terrorism and human trafficking, has been enabled. So corruption has made the criminal groups richer, more powerful, with an international scope, and consequently, more dangerous. So corruption has become a really serious matter to fight against in the international arena. Therefore, the international community started to work together on different treaties and laws, among other things. They wanted to coordinate actions to combat corruption. And here we have, for example, the Inter-American Convention Against Corruption, the Convention on Combating Bribery of Foreign Public Officials in the International Business Transactions, and, of course, the emblematic United Nations Convention Against Corruption. Now, as you know, these treaties establish the obligation of all state parties to enact, amend, or harmonize their legislation with the international treaties. For what? To investigate and to take the appropriate legal actions to fight corruption. But in fact, these treaties go further. They dispose that countries must cooperate in fighting corruption. They must cooperate in fighting corruption, which includes prevention, investigation, prosecution, as well as imposing sanctions to perpetrators. In fact, through the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, countries are bound to render specific forms of mutual legal assistance in gathering and transferring evidence for use in court and to extradite offenders. But regarding the whistleblowers, these treaties say that each party shall consider incorporating into its domestic legal system appropriate measures to provide protection against any unjustified treatment for any whistleblower. So, on the one hand, we have the obligation to cooperate with each other to fight against corruption, but in the other, each country has the responsibility of developing measures to protect the people who report corruption and other wrongdoings. Alas, this can be problematic, especially in a world where extraterritorial anti-corruption laws, such as the FCPA and some others of other countries, provide to local prosecutors the power to act against foreign corruption schemes, even when those schemes have taken place mostly or entirely outside their jurisdiction. And my point here is that the rise of local anti-foreign corruption laws, along with the international cooperation, has resulted in an increasing number of focal points of enforcement, leaving the whistleblowers in a possibly sort of gray area. Because imagine this. You are a whistleblower of an international corrupt scheme where 3 countries are simultaneously investigating. Do you have to go to the authorities of your country to report corruption? I mean, if you're a German citizen, great. But if you're from Mexico, you have to think about it twice. If you report before a foreign authority, are they going to grant you with protection even if you are not a national? And using which set of rules? Think about the Lavallato case where American authorities cooperated with Brazilian authorities to investigate what was happening in Petrobras. This anti-corruption joint venture produced a settlement in which Petrobras had to pay a combined penalty of $853.2 million, on which the Department of Justice and the Security and Exchange Commission of the United States collected 10%, and the rest was collected by the Brazilian authorities. But what happened with the whistleblowers that showed the world what was happening with the case of Odebrecht? The name of some of them are now in the list of casualties, and it didn't matter that other countries would have been able to protect them. So, if you had the opportunity to write a law to protect whistleblowers, what would you include?
Thank you. And I think with that, we'll pivot to the middle. Before we do the breakout rooms, Siri's going to talk a little bit about the Mark McGann Uber files case in particular, and we'll be using that as sort of the launch pad for the breakout discussions.
Thank you. So I'll quickly go over the Mark McGann story and prime you to talk about this with your group. So you all have the colored Post-it notes. Those are the people you're going to be talking with. If you have a pink Post-it, you will be talking with Carlos. If you have a green Post-it, you'll be talking with me. And if you have an orange Post-it, you will be talking with Angeles. So Mark McGann was a lobbyist for a multinational corporation called Uber. You may be familiar with this ride-sharing platform. And he, in 2022, reported using 124,000 documents that Uber was operating in countries where it knew rideshare services were illegal without regard to the law, and then also implemented processes that help them evade enforcement, among other things. So there's a whole slew of things that Mark McGann reported around how Uber interacted with foreign officials, the amount of money they spent on lobbying, and other things like that. He got this information because he was a high-ranking insider. One of the first things Uber said when Mark McGann's revelations came out was, he's just saying this because he wants to get more money out of us. This is an incredibly common thing for companies to say about whistleblowers. They want to highlight that there's some nefarious intention. But Mark McGann says that he decided to speak up because he was inspired by the courage of Frances Haugen, the whistleblower who went to Congress and blew the whistle about misconduct that she believed was happening at Facebook, another tech industry publicly traded company. So our question for you today is, if you were Mark McGann, what would you do? How would you know what to do? And what information would you still need after hearing from the three of us to decide what would be the best course of action for you? We're going to take these insights, and after our breakout session is over, we're going to report back, so we're going to hear what people said, and then we're going to figure out how to formulate this into a letter to the United States Congress about how they should better inform the world about our effective whistleblower programs and what operators like Mark McGann, who are functioning on a multinational level, need to know in order to help the United States stop corruption around the world.
So in other words, the breakout sessions will put you in the role of a whistleblower and how you would approach reporting or not reporting this misconduct. So I think at this point we can go to our groups, and we're going to have just roughly about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll sort of let everyone know when we're going to move into reporting and wrapping up. So this is your chance to engage in a lively discussion about this. Can you cut the lapel mics while we're doing the breakout sessions? Thank you. Thank you. So while we're here, since I work in organizational development, I encourage you all to connect to the National Whistleblower Center. You can either join our mailing list through whistleblowers.org or find us on your various social media channels, LinkedIn. There's a lot of content going around, and these are ongoing conversations, right? So we do encourage you to stay in touch, however is most convenient for you in whatever medium. So for this final portion, each of the breakout session moderators is going to kind of report back so that all of us kind of have an idea of everything that was discussed. So, yeah?
No, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah? Oh, okay, cool. So I think we're just going to have you guys report, and then if there's any final questions anyone has, we can just wrap up a bow with that so that everyone feels heard.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Thank you. Thank you. So just a quick logistics thing. Grace is up here. She's been our rapporteur. And so she'll be collecting emails for anybody who wants to be included in any updates about this panel. So our hope, actually our goal, and what we're going to do is send a letter to Congress. So every member of the United States Congress will get a letter from us saying, we had this workshop. There were people from around the world participating, and this is what they want to know from the US government about whistleblower programs and how the United States plans to take transnational whistleblowers seriously. So we want to send that letter to you all so you see what we write, and also send you invitations to participate in future programming and join our mailing list and all that other cool stuff. So Grace will be going around with a sheet of paper to get your email addresses. A beautiful pearl earring has gone astray. Okay, so if whoever it belongs to can come up and get it at the end of the panel or whenever. I know losing jewelry is always hard. So I just want to say thank you to all my green people. You were all super insightful. We had some whistleblowers in my green people group, and a lot of questions came up around US laws and anti-retaliation, employers, their responsibility to protect whistleblowers and going through internal compliance mechanisms, what motivates whistleblowers, and also why the US makes certain decisions about enforcement. Why do they take actions on certain tips but not on other tips? That was the crux of our discussion. But one of the really interesting components of our discussion, in my view, was that we had a great mix of people who are working with the private sector and informing the private sector about how to better interact with whistleblowers, whistleblowers themselves, and people who were in governmental positions who wanted to know more about transnational enforcement mechanisms and how to address corruption using those mechanisms. So that was main takeaway, but I think, did I forget anything? Good, okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask Grace to help me with this. Can I use this one? Yeah. Thank you, Grace.
Yeah, our group, we talked about wanting to make sure that the government had a good idea of what a whistleblower was, but also what a journalist was, and reinforce journalistic integrity, making sure sources are protected. People want to feel like when they come and report that they can count on their identity being protected if that's how they choose to go about whistleblowing. We also talked about monetary rewards and how that's not everything, but also if you are putting, your career at stake, you want to know that there is a possibility that you could be rewarded for that in the end, financially, even if it's a couple years down the line, that is a possibility. We also talked about anti-retaliation, making sure that you are protected from any workplace discrimination, or that you and your family as well are protected from harm. Mm-hmm. I think those were the
and
major.
different contexts, like in the international arena,
Right, yeah, and we also were discussing, how different countries have different protections and trying to create a way for people to report that is standard amongst all of those, and that all of those reports are taken seriously, whether you're a small country or a larger country.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, one of the main concerns that we had at the Pink group was how expensive it is to be a whistleblower. And in the case of Mark McGann, the need for states and the countries to regulate these legal budgets, let's say. We were talking about the Samantha Power conference this morning, that she said that USAID will launch a whistleblower shield program or something. I don't remember the exact name, but this is one of the main concerns, the legal budget situation. Charlie said it is, sorry, I forgot.
We're just discussing different incentives because a lot of, I was sort of spilling over from my work in other capacities in the organization, but how whistleblowers face a number of daunting challenges when they decide to step forward and report these crimes. Sometimes they become unhireable in the field that they've been specializing in for decades. This happens in tech. So it really changes a lot from sector to sector. And within generations, whistleblowers are starting to get younger and more hip and have online followings and so forth. So incentivizing it so that people's lives, their safety, but also their professional, they can continue in their profession, whatever that means, so that they don't get the scarlet letter treatment that we often see. That was,
And there was a very important one about the negative connotation that in some countries has the word whistleblowers. Mostly in Latin American and Caribbean countries, el denunciante, the one that denounce, could have like a negative connotation, and the need to start changing that perspective, to start changing that connotation. But it was a very fruitful conversation. Thank you for everyone.
So any other, sorry about that, any other questions or any comments or any last words any of you would like to share now that you know all of this, now that we kind of have a bird's eye view of everything that was discussed today? And thanks again. This was exactly what we were hoping to do, and you helped us to do it. So it's great to be here and as this workshop wraps up, and for it to turn out the way we were hoping to. So first of all, we'd like to thank you. But if we kind of left the last few minutes open for a Q&A or any additional notes, anything that's lingering with you that you might want to ask one of our subject matter experts here, this is your time. Okay? Anyone?
Okay, yeah, we got some from the internet.
Here you go.
Thank you. I'm just manning the online chat, and we just have one question from Stephen Lee. And Stephen asks, are there any laws to protect law enforcement whistleblowers?
Ooh, that's a good one. Yeah, are there any laws to protect law enforcement whistleblowers? So law enforcement is a unique kind of employment arena because it's governed by every single jurisdiction that it happens to be in. So if you're working in law enforcement, you first have to look at the local level and see what whistleblower protections there are for you. There may be a state whistleblower law that would appeal to you. And if you're a federal law enforcement officer, you have to look at the federal whistleblower protections for federal employees. So in the United States, that is the Office of Special Counsel that law enforcement that work on the federal level would go to. But transnational law enforcement would go on the same path that any other whistleblower would go on, which is to look at the laws that have transnational reach and see if the complaints relate to any of that. So for example, if you're a law enforcement officer and you see bribery happening, if any of the parties involved in the bribery are in publicly traded companies or have some sort of connection with the U.S. government or U.S. financial system, you would want to file a tip with the U.S. government under one of the agencies that can actually enforce the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So it really depends on what type of violation you're reporting. But that was a great question because law enforcement are very uniquely situated because they are actually government employees.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's another one. Thank you so much, and thank you for everybody online. We are so happy to have you.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As far as I know, there are only 3 countries in the world that have in their whistleblowing law rewarding mechanism. US, Korea, and recently Lithuania. So this means that the rest of the world does not have this rewarding mechanism. So my first question is, do you think that they are valuable or not, the rewarding mechanism?
The rewarding mechanism?
Yeah. And the second is, do you
There's only
think
3
that
countries that
we
do.
should introduce motivational mechanism fostering psychological safety?
That came up
Do
in
either
our-
of you want to comment on that?
On
The first one was the
Safety,
lack of
maybe?
rewarding mechanisms. It's only 3 nations in the country that do that compensate. And then the second part of the question was protections against psychological trauma.
To enable a sort of safety context that incentives people to make the whistleblowing.
Yeah.
I guess on one hand, on the financial rewards, we've been having lately, the last year, a conversation about the idea of including it in Latin American countries. In Latin American countries and the Caribbean, only Brazil, Nicaragua, and Peru have financial reward systems. What we have found is that socially, in Latin America, it's not well accepted, the idea of the financial reward. And on this regard, many have said, for example, Spanish people and the Spanish anti-corruption specialists think that the report of corruption should be a civil obligation. You shouldn't be, as a citizen, paid for reporting. So I guess it's a cultural idea as well. Like the United States have been having financial rewards programs for many years. The FCPA, the Dodd-Frank Act, the False Claims Act prevents it and gives to the citizens the obligation to report and substitute themselves in their government shoes and react and act against wrongful and acts of corruption. So I guess it's like a cultural situation, and I guess it's important to, at least, as we have said in a very recent letter to the Mexican Congress, we don't know if for Mexico is going to be a system that could work. But at least let's have the conversation. Let's debate about the idea of financial rewards.
Would you like to add? Well, yeah. I was thinking about some cases in Latin America where the concept of good faith is it's in collision with the idea of getting a reward. So if you have that in your mind, then, at least in Latin America, then you don't have a good faith to go and denounce something and report something. And that's, the good faith concept has a legal, in those cases, has a legal consequence. And then a lot of people just was not taking into account as a whistleblower because they wanted to be rewarded. So that's something also cultural, I think. And it's difficult to establish like a standard, an international standard about this.
Yeah, that I agree 100%. This is something that we could have a whole panel about just on its own. The reward issue, cultural values around rewards, how rewards factor into social stigmatization of whistleblowers by and large. So that's a great question. Of course, National Whistleblower Center wants to see reward provisions widely proliferated. And the core reason for that is because they are empirically supported. Research has shown that people are more likely to report when there is a chance that they might be rewarded. And that's part of the reason why the US programs publicize these rewards so openly. They won't tell you anything else about the case, but they will tell you how much money they gave the whistleblower. And over the years, it's been proven that this motivates more people to come forward, and because of the rewards, significantly larger numbers of tips have been submitted, significantly larger numbers of quality tips have been submitted, and you can see that based on the False Claims Act, which actually didn't have a mandatory reward provision in it before 1986. You can look at the numbers of whistleblower tips that were good that came in 1986, and then look at them post the addition of a mandatory reward, and they increased by multiple times. They literally have skyrocketed since mandatory rewards were included. So regardless of the cultural issues, math is math. And the math shows that rewards work. And that's why NWC supports them. And I would love to have a panel about that, so if you want to invite us, please do. But I want to talk about psychological safety. I think the reward aspect factors into that because it sends a psychological message that whistleblowing is good. So even when you take out the empirical data about people seeking rewards in dollar amounts, any type of positive reinforcement for speaking up, as you mentioned during our Circle to Speak Up culture, any type of positive reinforcement for speaking up will encourage people to blow the whistle because it shows them that the culture that they're in thinks that it's a good thing to blow the whistle, thinks that it's something that's worth protecting and incentivizing. What we currently have in most cultures is the idea that speaking up is bad, troublesome, dangerous, disruptive, and something that people only do when they have bad faith. These are stereotypes that National Whistleblower Center has challenged since we started. We've had great success with it, but there's still a long way to go. So if you want to foster psychological safety that encourages people to come forward with useful information, reward people when they speak up. And I mean about anything. If somebody says, I think the air conditioner is on a little high in here, what do you think? Say, thank you for letting me know that you don't feel comfortable in this temperature. Maybe we should change it. Those little indicators that speaking up is okay can have a massive impact. And I encourage everyone to kind of take that, and implement it in your daily life.
Anyone else? One more? Cool. Yeah, and he'll be the last, this will be the last one.
Thank you, yep, uh-huh.
Go.
I'm going to give you a hypothetical situation because it's relevant to my country. What would you do if you want to whistleblow against the chief of the Anticorruption Commission for your country? This is the true story. So,
The chief of the military police?
chief of the Anti-Corruption Commission for the country. True story.
Not unheard of.
Anyone want to
take that? You want to take it, Carlos?
I guess that it's at first we have to have a discussion about the appointment of public servants, no? And that's a big discussion. The second one, and we were talking about it in our group, every whistleblower wants an independent agency to hear his report, to receive her report. But in a very specific case, I guess there could be some systems about recuse himself, or herself, the director of the president or the head of the commission. But I mean, in the context of an investigation, maybe you cannot do that much, and that of course reduces the incentives of whistleblowers to actually go and report. However, there is an idea also, we talked about external mechanisms, and we talk about the public disclosure. When the head of an anti-corruption commission is the one that will be reported, maybe an external mechanism could be the option. Maybe the public disclosure on the media could be also the option. We were talking about maybe in this case of Mark McGann, we don't know if he followed through internal mechanisms within Uber or the compliance section in Uber, and maybe that's the reason why he went publicly regarding this incident. So I guess it's a very important, but it goes through appointments, it goes through independent authorities, and how we as a civil society, as the media, as journalism, could strengthen the agencies, anti-corruption agencies in our countries.
I'm a quiescent party here.
Okay, so get a lawyer, get a lawyer, get a lawyer.
Get a lawyer.
Because a lawyer is the only one who can help you figure out how to deal with that complex system. This is a perfect example of the type of rule of law issue that whistleblowers are uniquely positioned to address. But these are the whistleblowers that need legal representation, and there are many avenues, but even exploring those can be scary. So get a lawyer, and then decide with the advice of your lawyer what to do next.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up. Thanks again for your presence, for staying and chatting with us, and helping us to inform this letter to Congress that we're hoping to get out, that we will be getting out. And again, please connect, whistleblowers.org, connect to us. We'd love to hear from you moving forward. This work involves all of us, so you're part of that work too, as hopefully you experienced today. And have a great experience today. And have a great rest of the conference and a great rest of the week.